The yellow school bus should never have been on Route 89 that January afternoon. Everyone in Glacier County, Montana, knew that winter storms in the Rockies didn't give warnings, they gave consequences. But budget cuts had forced the consolidation of 3 rural school districts, and now Bus 47 carried 12 children across 47 miles of mountain wilderness that separated their scattered homes from Cold Springs Elementary School. Behind the wheel sat Grace Mitchell, 56 years old, with 23 years of driving these roads without a single accident. Her hands gripped the steering wheel with the confidence of someone who had navigated every switchback, every ice patch, every narrow bridge between the school and the last ranch house on her route. She wore her standard uniform, navy blue jacket with the school district patch, and her grey hair pulled back in a practical bun that hadn't changed style in 2 decades. The dashboard clock read 3:42 p.m. They were running 12 minutes behind schedule because Tommy Reeves had gotten into another fight at recess, and Principal Hawkins had needed Grace to wait while he called Tommy's father. Now the afternoon sky was darkening with alarming speed, and the snow that had been a few lazy flakes an hour ago was becoming a white curtain that erased the world. Grace squinted through the windshield where the wipers battled uselessly against the onslaught. Visibility had dropped to maybe 20 feet. The yellow center line was disappearing under fresh powder, and the familiar landmarks that usually guided her, the split pine tree, the Peterson barn, the rock face that looked like a sleeping giant, were all vanishing into white nothingness. Behind her, 12 voices created the usual chaos of an afternoon bus ride. Arguments about who said what at lunch, complaints about homework, laughter over something that happened in gym class. The noise that Grace normally tuned out with practiced ease, but today it grated on her nerves because she needed to concentrate, and the storm was getting worse by the minute. "Miss Grace, I can't see the road no more," called out Tommy Reeves from seat 7. 8 years old, missing his 2 front teeth, constantly getting into trouble, but with a heart bigger than his common sense. "Any more, Tommy? Can't see any more," Grace corrected automatically, her teacher instincts never off duty, even though she wasn't a teacher. "And that's because we're in a snowstorm, honey. Nothing to worry about." But Grace was worried. Very worried. The temperature gauge on the dashboard showed -14 degrees Fahrenheit and dropping. The storm had come out of nowhere with a ferocity that suggested the morning weather report had been catastrophically wrong. She still had 6 stops to make, the farthest being Emma Chen's family ranch, another 23 miles up the mountain. At this rate, with visibility near zero and the road conditions deteriorating, that 23 miles might as well be 200. The bus shuddered as wind slammed into it from the side. Grace compensated, keeping the vehicle centered on what she hoped was still the road. Her heart hammered. In all her years driving, she had seen bad storms, black ice, whiteout conditions, but something about this felt different. This felt malevolent, like the mountain itself had turned against them. Before we continue, I want to ask you to hit that like button and leave a comment telling me what city and country you're watching from. It really helps the channel, and I love seeing where all of you are located around the world. Now let's get back to the story. Grace checked the rearview mirror, mentally cataloguing her passengers. Front to back, left side, Marcus Webb, 12 years old, quiet and responsible, the oldest kid on the bus. Katie Armstrong, 9, always drawing in her notebook. The Morrison twins, Jake and Luke, age 7, identical down to the cowlick on their left temple. Sarah Chen, 6 years old, the youngest and smallest, still wearing her pink backpack that was almost as big as she was. Right side, Tommy Reeves and his little sister Mia, age 6, inseparable since their mother died 2 years ago. Lily Patterson, 10, who read books above her grade level and asked questions that made teachers uncomfortable. Emma Chen, 8, Sarah's older sister and protector. The Blackwood siblings, David, age 11, and Rachel, age 9, whose father was deployed overseas. And in the very back, Joseph Little Bear, age 10, the quiet kid who watched everything and said little. 12 children, 12 lives. Grace's responsibility. The weight of it pressed on her chest like the cold pressing against the windows. Something in the bus's engine made a sound that Grace had never heard before. A grinding, metallic shriek that cut through the wind noise and made every hair on her arms stand up. The steering wheel vibrated under her hands. The dashboard lights flickered. "Please no," Grace whispered. "Not now. Not here." The engine coughed. The bus lurched. Grace felt the transmission slipping, felt the power draining away like water through her fingers. She had maybe 30 seconds before the engine died completely, and they were in the worst possible location, on a narrow stretch of road carved into the mountainside, with a sheer cliff dropping away to her right and solid granite rising to her left. 20 seconds. Grace's eyes scanned desperately for anywhere to pull over. There was no shoulder, no turnout, nothing but the road and the drop and the storm. 10 seconds. There, ahead on the left, a slightly wider area where an old logging road intersected the highway. It wasn't much, maybe 10 feet of extra space, but it was something. It was survival. Grace coaxed the dying bus those final yards, feeling the engine's death rattle in her bones. They rolled to a stop, just as the power gave out completely. The engine died with a final metallic gasp. The dashboard lights went dark.
The heater stopped blowing.
The sudden silence was so complete that Grace could hear her own heartbeat. For 3 seconds, nobody spoke. 12 children held their breath, sensing that something was very wrong. Then, Marcus Webb's voice came from the front seat, carefully controlled. "Miss Grace, why did we stop?" Grace took a deep breath and turned to face her passengers. 12 pairs of eyes looked back at her, some wide with fear, some confused, all of them trusting her to fix this, to make it okay, to get them home safely, like she had done every school day for years. She made her voice steady and calm. "The bus broke down, kids, but there's nothing to worry about. We're going to wait right here until help arrives." "How long will that take?" asked Lily Patterson, too smart not to understand the implications. "Not long at all," Grace lied smoothly. "The school has a policy. When a bus is more than 30 minutes late, they send someone to check. So we just need to be patient and stay warm." Grace pulled out her cell phone, already knowing what she would see. No signal. They were in a dead zone, surrounded by mountains that blocked any transmission. The phone was useless, except as a flashlight. She climbed out of her seat and opened the emergency supply compartment. Every Montana school bus carried winter survival gear by state law. Grace pulled out the supplies and did a quick inventory. 6 emergency blankets, those thin metallic sheets that were supposed to retain body heat. 12 energy bars, 6 bottles of water, a first aid kit, 3 flashlights, a box of road flares, a folding shovel, a bag of chemical hand warmers. It was nowhere near enough. "Okay, everyone listen carefully," Grace said, keeping her voice teacher firm. "We're going to have a little adventure while we wait for rescue. I need everyone to buddy up, 2 kids to a seat, share blankets and body heat. Older kids, take a younger kid. Marcus, you're with Joseph. Katie, you take Sarah. Emma, you're with Mia." The children moved without argument, some scared, some excited by the novelty. Ranch kids, most of them. They understood cold. They understood that winter in Montana wasn't a joke. Grace distributed the emergency blankets, draping them over pairs of children. She activated the chemical hand warmers and passed them around. She handed out the energy bars. "Make it last," she instructed. "Eat slow, small bites." She watched them unwrap the bars with cold, numbed fingers, saw the discipline they showed in not devouring them immediately. Good kids, tough kids, but kids nonetheless, and the temperature in the bus was already dropping noticeably. Without the engine running, without heat, the bus would become a metal freezer within an hour. Grace checked her watch. 3:51 p.m. The school office would notice they were late around 4:30 when the first parent called to ask why their child wasn't home yet. Someone would be dispatched to look for them. But in this storm, with visibility
Near zero,
how would anyone find them? The bus was white and yellow, but in a blizzard, everything was white. They were invisible. "Miss Grace, it's really cold," said Sarah Chen, her small voice trembling. Grace pulled off her own jacket and wrapped it around the 6-year-old. "Better, sweetie?" Sarah nodded, but her lips were already showing a faint blue tinge. Grace's stomach clenched. Hypothermia could set in fast with small children. They had less body mass, less ability to generate heat. The wind hit the bus like a battering ram, rocking it on its suspension. Snow hissed against the windows, piling up against the glass in drifts. Through the whiteout, Grace could see absolutely nothing. The world had shrunk to the interior of this bus. 12 children and growing cold. Then Tommy Reeves said something that made Grace's blood freeze colder than any storm. "Miss Grace, there's animals out there." Grace turned sharply. "What?" "Animals. Big ones. Moving around the bus." Tommy pressed his face against the window, his breath fogging the glass. Grace moved to look out the driver's side window. At first, she saw nothing but white chaos. Then shapes emerged from the snow. Large shapes, 4-legged, moving with purpose and coordination. Wolves. Grace counted them as they materialized from the storm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Grey wolves, their winter coats thick and matted with snow, circling the bus slowly, deliberately, like predators assessing prey. "Oh God," Grace whispered. "Are they going to eat us?" Mia Reeves asked, her voice rising toward panic. "No, honey, no. Wolves don't attack people." Grace said it with confidence she didn't feel. She knew wolves generally avoided humans, but she also knew that desperate, hungry animals could be unpredictable. And she had 12 children trapped in a metal box with no way to defend them. The wolves completed their circle and stopped. They sat in the snow, maybe 15 feet from the bus, arranged at regular intervals like sentinels. 6 grey wolves, their amber eyes reflecting the dim light from inside the bus. Then a 7th wolf appeared. This one was different. This one was white. Pure white, like the snow itself, except larger than any wolf Grace had ever seen. It moved with an authority that made the grey wolves look like subordinates. The white wolf walked directly to the front of the bus and stopped, facing the windshield, facing Grace. For a long moment, woman and wolf stared at each other. Grace felt her breath catch. The animal's eyes were not amber like the others. They were blue, pale blue, almost translucent, and filled with an intelligence that seemed impossible. "Miss Grace, what's happening?" Marcus asked, his voice tight. "I don't know," Grace admitted. The white wolf tilted its massive head back and howled. The sound cut through the storm, primal and beautiful and terrifying. The other wolves joined in, creating a chorus that made the windows vibrate. Inside the bus, every child fell silent, transfixed. When the howling stopped, the white wolf looked at Grace one more time. Then it walked to the front left corner of the bus and lay down in the snow, pressing its body against the metal. One by one, the grey wolves did the same. They positioned themselves along the sides of the bus, their bodies against the vehicle, and settled down into the snow. "What are they doing?" whispered Emma Chen. Grace watched in disbelief as the wolves arranged themselves in a protective formation around the bus. They weren't attacking, they weren't threatening, they were sheltering. "I think," Grace said slowly, "I think they're trying to help us." It was impossible. It defied everything Grace knew about wild animals. But she couldn't deny what she was seeing. The wolves had positioned themselves to block the wind. Already, she could feel the difference. The howling gale that had been battering the bus from all sides had lessened. The wolves' bodies were creating a windbreak, a shelter. "Are they magic wolves?" asked Sarah Chen, her eyes enormous. "No, sweetie, they're just wolves, but maybe very special wolves." Grace pulled out one of the flashlights and shone it through the windshield at the white wolf. The animal raised its head to look at the light, then at Grace. For just a moment, Grace could have sworn the wolf nodded. Then it laid its head back down on its paws and closed its eyes. Marcus moved up to sit behind Grace. "Miss Grace, my great-grandfather used to tell a story about a white wolf. Said it saved his life in a blizzard back in the 60s. Your great-grandfather?" Joe Webb, he was a trapper, got caught in a storm up near Glacier Park. Said a white wolf appeared out of nowhere and led him to an old cabin. Stayed with him for 3 days until the weather cleared. Everybody thought he was crazy, but he swore it was true until the day he died. Grace looked at the white wolf lying in the snow. "How long ago did your great-grandfather die?" "Before I was born, maybe 20 years ago." Marcus paused. "Miss Grace, wolves don't live 20 years. The story don't make sense." "Doesn't make sense," Grace corrected automatically. She stared at the white wolf, her mind racing. Stories of white wolves helping travelers weren't uncommon in Montana folklore. Her own grandmother had told tales, but Grace had always dismissed them as legends, fairy tales told to comfort people in harsh winters. Maybe some fairy tales were based on truth. The temperature inside the bus had stabilized. It was still cold, well below freezing, but it had stopped dropping so rapidly. The wolves were working. Their body heat, their windbreak effect. It was buying time. Grace checked her watch. 4:17 p.m. Still no rescue. The light outside was fading fast. In another hour it would be full dark, and the temperature would plummet even further. They needed help, and they needed it soon. She tried the bus radio, but it was as dead as the engine. She waved her cell phone in the air, hoping for even a flicker of signal. Nothing. "Miss Grace, I'm scared," said Lily Patterson quietly. Grace climbed back to sit with the children. She gathered them close, all 12 of them, huddled together under the emergency blankets like a many-headed creature seeking warmth. "I know you're scared, sweetheart. I'm a little scared too. But you know what? We're going to be okay. You know why?" "Why?" asked several voices at once. "Because we have each other. Because we're tough Montana kids who know how to handle cold. Because help is coming. And because we have some very unusual guardians watching over us." Grace nodded toward the windows where the wolves lay in the snow. "Tell us a story, Miss Grace," said Emma Chen. "Like you do on long rides sometimes."
Grace smiled. "What kind of story?" "A happy one," said Sarah, "with a good ending." Grace took a breath and began. "Once upon a time, there was a school bus driver who had the best job in the world. Every day, she got to drive the smartest, bravest, toughest kids in all of Montana. Kids who could handle anything, even a snowstorm, and a bus breakdown, and a pack of wolves." "That's us," said Tommy. "That's right. And one day, when these brave kids got stuck in a storm, they didn't panic. They stayed calm. They helped each other. The big kids took care of the little kids. They shared their warmth and their courage. And they trusted that they would be okay." "Were they okay?" asked Mia. "We're still writing that part," Grace said honestly. "But I know how the story ends. It ends with every single one of you safe at home with your families, telling them about the adventure you had." "Promise?" Sarah asked. Grace looked at the little girl's trusting face and felt her heart crack. She couldn't promise. She had no idea if rescue would come in time. But she said it anyway, because sometimes hope was all you had. "I promise." Outside, the white wolf raised its head as if it had heard. It looked at Grace through the window, those pale blue eyes seeming to see straight through her. Then it stood, shook the snow from its coat, and walked around the bus, checking on each of the other wolves. Grace watched the animal move with that impossible grace and authority. It stopped at each grey wolf, touching noses, communicating in ways humans couldn't understand. Then it returned to its position at the front and settled back down. The storm raged on. Snow piled higher against the windows. The temperature gauge on Grace's phone read -23 degrees Fahrenheit and still dropping. But inside the circle of wolves, inside the metal shell of the bus, 12 children and one bus driver huddled together and waited. And somehow, impossibly,
Grace felt less afraid than she had an hour ago. The white wolf was here. The pack was guarding them. And even though it made no sense, even though her rational mind rejected it, her heart believed they were not alone.
"Miss Grace," Marcus said quietly, so the younger kids wouldn't hear. "What if nobody finds us?" Grace looked at the 12-year-old, saw the fear in his eyes that he was trying so hard to hide. She thought about lying, about giving false comfort. But Marcus deserved truth. "Then we survive until morning. We keep each other warm. We stay calm. We wait for the storm to break. And we don't give up. Okay?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Okay. You're a good kid, Marcus. Your parents should be proud." "My dad says a man's job is to protect his family." Marcus looked around at the other children. "I know I'm just 12, but if something happens, I'll help you protect them." Grace felt tears prick her eyes. "I know you will, honey. But nothing's going to happen. We're going to be fine." She said it with such conviction that she almost believed it herself. Almost. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Grace kept the children awake and moving, knowing that sleep in these conditions could be deadly. She led them through simple exercises, clapping games, anything to keep blood flowing. 5:30 p.m. Full darkness arrived. Grace turned on 2 of the 3 flashlights, rationing the batteries in her mind. 6 p.m. The children were shivering constantly now, even huddled together. Grace distributed the last of the water in tiny sips. 6:45 p.m. Still no rescue. The storm showed no signs of weakening. If anything, it was getting worse. Then something extraordinary happened. The white wolf stood and walked into the darkness, disappearing into the storm. Grace's heart sank. The wolf was leaving. They were being abandoned. But 5 minutes later, the white wolf returned. And it wasn't alone. Behind it came more wolves, many more. Grace counted them in the flashlight beam, her hand shaking. 10, 12, 15, maybe more. Different colors, gray, black, brown, silver. The pack had called for reinforcements. The newcomers immediately positioned themselves around the bus, layering their bodies 2 and 3 deep in places, creating a living wall of fur and muscle between the children and the killing cold. The effect was immediate and miraculous. The temperature inside the bus stopped dropping. It stabilized, then actually began to rise slightly. Not warm, but survivable. Grace pressed her hand against the window, where 3 wolves lay piled against the metal. She could feel their warmth seeping through. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know if you understand, but thank you." The white wolf, back in its position at the front of the bus, turned to look at her. And Grace would swear for the rest of her life that the animal understood every word. Outside, in the darkness and the snow and the howling wind, 15 wolves maintained their vigil. Inside, 12 children finally allowed themselves to believe they might survive the night. And Grace Mitchell, who had never believed in miracles, found herself praying to a white wolf with blue eyes that seemed older than the light mountains themselves. The first death scare came at 7:34 p.m. Sarah Chen, the smallest child on the bus, suddenly went limp in Katie Armstrong's arms. Her eyes rolled back, her breathing became shallow and irregular, her lips turned from blue to grey. "Miss Grace!" Katie screamed. "Something's wrong with Sarah!" Grace lunged to the back of the bus, her own body stiff from cold. She pulled Sarah into her arms and felt the little girl's skin, ice cold, clammy. The 6-year-old was barely conscious, her pulse weak and thready. "Sarah, baby, stay with me. Open your eyes." Grace rubbed the child's hands vigorously, trying to stimulate circulation. "Come on, sweetheart. Stay awake." Sarah's eyes flickered open for a moment, unfocused and glassy. "I'm sleepy, Miss Grace. So sleepy." "I know, honey, but you have to stay awake. Talk to me. Tell me about your favorite thing." "Horses," Sarah mumbled. "Want a horse for my birthday." "That's good. What kind of horse? What color?" "White, like the wolf outside." Sarah's eyes started to close again. Grace shook her gently. "No sleeping. Keep talking to me. What are you going to name your white horse?" But Sarah had stopped responding. Her breathing was now dangerously shallow. Marcus appeared at Grace's shoulder. "What do we do?" Grace's mind raced through her limited first aid training. Hypothermia, stage 2 progressing to stage 3. She needed to warm Sarah's core temperature. But how? They had no heat source, no warm liquids, nothing but their own bodies. "Everyone, I need you to move closer. We're going to make a huddle around Sarah. Use your body heat." The children moved without question, piling on top of each other, creating a cocoon of bodies around the dying little girl. Grace positioned herself at the center, holding Sarah against her chest, feeling the child's heart flutter like a trapped bird. "Come on, baby. Fight. Don't you give up on me." Outside, the white wolf sensed something was wrong. Grace saw it through the window, pacing, agitated. The animal moved to the side of the bus where they huddled and pressed itself harder against the metal, as if trying to push its warmth through the wall. The other wolves responded to their leader's distress. They shifted positions, layering themselves even more densely around that section of the bus. 15 wolves, maybe more now, all focusing their collective body heat on one specific area. And somehow, impossibly, it worked. Slowly, degree by agonizing degree, Sarah's core temperature began to rise. Color returned to her lips, her breathing deepened. After 10 minutes that felt like 10 hours, her eyes opened and focused on Grace's face. "Miss Grace?" Grace felt tears freeze on her cheeks. "Hey, baby, welcome back. I had a dream about the white wolf. He told me it wasn't my time yet." Grace looked out at the white wolf, still pressed against the bus. The animal's blue eyes met hers, and again Grace felt that impossible sense of communication, of understanding.
Well, the white wolf was right. It's definitely not your time. Grace settled Sarah back with the other children, but kept a closer eye on her. That had been too close. If they didn't get rescued soon, Sarah wouldn't be the only one in danger. Already, she could see signs of severe hypothermia in several of the smaller children. Confusion, slurred speech, excessive shivering that would eventually stop when the body gave up trying to generate heat. They were running out of time. Grace checked her watch. 8:02 p.m. They had been stranded for over 4 hours. Where was rescue? Surely by now the school had noticed they were missing. Surely someone was looking for them. But in this storm, how would anyone find them? The bus was buried in snow, invisible from the air. The GPS was dead. They were in a dead zone for cell signals. They might as well have fallen off the face of the earth. Grace pulled out one of the road flares from the emergency kit, weighing her options. If she lit one now, it would burn for maybe 15 minutes, creating a bright red light that could be seen for miles in clear weather. But in this blizzard, the visibility was maybe 50 feet. The flare would be useless unless rescue was practically on top of them. She had 6 flares total. If she wasted them now and rescue came at dawn with no way to signal their position, the consequences could be fatal. Grace made the hardest decision of her life. She put the flare back in the kit. She would wait. She would trust that somehow someone would find them. "Miss Grace, I need to use the bathroom," said Mia Reeves, her voice small and embarrassed. Grace's heart sank. Of course, they'd been on the bus for hours. She looked at the emergency supplies and found nothing useful for this situation. She looked outside at the wolves and the storm and the darkness. "Can you hold it, sweetie?" "I really can't." Mia's voice trembled on the edge of tears. Grace made another impossible decision. "Okay, we're going to be very quick and very careful. Marcus, I need your help." She grabbed a flashlight and pulled on her jacket, which she'd given to Sarah earlier, but reclaimed when Sarah had warmed up. She looked at the white wolf through the window. "I'm going to open the door. We mean no harm. The little one just needs a minute." The white wolf stood immediately. It walked 10 feet away from the bus and sat down, its back to them. The other wolves followed suit, creating a privacy screen.
Grace stared in amazement. The wolf had understood. It had actually understood and responded. "Come on, Mia, fast as you can." Grace opened the door, and the Arctic cold slammed into them like a physical blow. It was so cold it burned, so cold it stole breath from lungs. Grace helped Mia down the steps, held a blanket for privacy while Marcus stood guard with the flashlight. 90 seconds, that's all it took. But 90 seconds in -25-degree weather was enough to leave Grace's exposed skin numb and painful. Her fingers were white and stiff as she helped Mia back into the bus and pulled the door shut. The wolves immediately returned to their positions, resuming their protective formation. Grace looked at the white wolf, who had resumed its place at the front of the bus. "Thank you," she said quietly. The wolf's ears twitched, acknowledging. "Miss Grace," said Joseph Littlebear, speaking for almost the first time since the ordeal began. "My grandfather says white wolves are spirit guides, says they only appear when someone needs protection real bad." "Your grandfather is Native American?" Grace asked. Joseph nodded. "Blackfeet. He's a tribal elder. He knows the old stories." "What do the stories say about white wolves?" Joseph was quiet for a moment, then spoke in a voice that seemed older than his 10 years. "They say white wolves carry the souls of ancestors who died protecting their families. They say they come back when children are in danger because they couldn't save their own kids, so they save other people's kids instead." A chill ran down Grace's spine that had nothing to do with the cold. "Does your grandfather's story say anything about blue eyes?" "Blue eyes mean the wolf died in winter, died in snow and ice." Joseph looked at the white wolf through the window. "That wolf out there, he's been dead a long time, but he ain't finished protecting people yet." The other children had fallen silent, listening. Even the oldest ones, who normally would have scoffed at ghost stories, were transfixed. "That's just a legend, right, Miss Grace?" asked Lily Patterson, but her voice held uncertainty. Grace looked at the white wolf, at the impossible organization of the pack, at the way they had responded to Sarah's crisis, at the way the white wolf had understood her words and given them privacy. "I don't know what's real anymore," Grace admitted, "but I know that wolf out there is keeping us alive."
Legend or not, spirit or animal, it doesn't matter. It's here, and it's helping us. The hours continued their slow crawl toward midnight. Grace kept the children talking, moving, fighting sleep. She told stories. She led them in songs. She made them play memory games and counting games and anything else she could think of to keep their minds active. 9 p.m. Tommy Reeves started crying. Quiet sobs he tried to hide. Grace pulled him close. "What's wrong, honey?" "I want my dad. I want to go home." "I know. Me too. Are we going to die out here?" Grace looked into his 8-year-old eyes and made a choice. "No, Tommy, we are not going to die. That white wolf out there? He didn't come all this way just to watch us give up. We're going to survive this. And tomorrow you're going to have the best story to tell your dad. Promise?" "I promise." It was a promise Grace had no right to make, but she made it anyway, because hope was all they had left. 10 p.m. The storm finally began to weaken. The snow fell less heavily. The wind died from a howl to a whisper. Grace felt a flicker of hope. If the weather cleared, rescue helicopters could fly, if they could just hold on until dawn. But the temperature continued to drop. Grace's phone showed -31 degrees. This was the kind of cold that killed in hours, not days. The white wolf suddenly stood and walked into the darkness. Several of the grey wolves followed. Grace felt panic rise. Were they leaving? After all this time, were the wolves abandoning them when they needed them most? But 10 minutes later, the wolves returned, and they were dragging something. Grace shone the flashlight out the window and saw branches. Large pine branches, still green and thick with needles. The wolves had brought them evergreen boughs. The white wolf and 2 greys positioned the branches along the side of the bus, creating an additional layer of insulation. Then they piled snow on top of the branches, packing it down.
They were building a snow shelter around the bus, using techniques that should have been beyond any animal's capability. "They're making an igloo," Marcus whispered in awe, "around the whole bus." It took the wolves 30 minutes. When they finished, the bus was encased in a shell of packed snow and evergreen branches, with only the roof and front exposed. The insulation effect was immediate. The temperature inside stabilized at a survivable level. Grace watched the white wolf shake snow from its coat and return to its position. The animal was breathing hard from the exertion, its sides heaving. It had exhausted itself to save them. "Rest now," Grace said softly. "You've done enough." The white wolf laid its head on its paws, but its eyes remained open, watchful. 11 p.m. Rachel Blackwood started talking about her father, deployed somewhere in the Middle East. "He's supposed to come home next month. I want to tell him about this, about the wolves and how we survived." "You will," Grace assured her. "You're going to tell him everything. What if he doesn't believe me? Then we'll all write letters confirming it happened. Every single one of us will tell him it's true." The children liked that idea. They started planning what they would say in their letters, how they would describe the white wolf, what details would make the story most exciting. It kept them talking, kept them engaged, kept them alive. Midnight arrived. They had been stranded for 8 hours. Grace's body ached from cold and tension. Her fingers and toes were numb, despite her boots and gloves. She was hungry, thirsty, exhausted. But she couldn't rest, couldn't let her guard down. These children needed her. She did another check of each child. Fingers, toes, ears, noses. Looking for frostbite, for confusion, for signs of critical hypothermia. Everyone was hanging on, but barely. The youngest ones were in the worst shape. Sarah, Mia, the Morrison twins. Their small bodies couldn't generate enough heat. Grace pulled off her socks and put them on Sarah's hands as extra mittens. She wrapped her scarf around Mia's head. She gave Marcus her gloves to share with the twins. She gave away every piece of warmth she had until she was down to just her uniform shirt and pants. "Miss Grace, you're freezing," Marcus protested. "I'm tougher than I look," Grace said, though her teeth were chattering. "You kids need it more." The white wolf watched this exchange through the window. Then it stood, walked to the door, and scratched at the metal. 3 deliberate scratches. Grace stared. "What do you want?" The wolf scratched again, then moved to lie directly against the door, its body pressed against the metal near Grace's seat. Understanding dawned. The wolf wanted to share its heat with her specifically, with the protector of the children. Grace moved to sit in the driver's seat, right where the wolf lay on the other side of the door. She pressed her back against the metal and felt warmth seeping through. Not much, but enough. The wolf was sharing its body heat directly with her. "Thank you," Grace whispered, tears running down her face. "Thank you for not leaving us." 12:30 a.m. Emma Chen started talking about her mother, who had died from cancer 2 years ago. Mom used to say that angels come in all shapes. She said sometimes they have wings, and sometimes they have fur. "Your mom sounds like she was very wise," Grace said. "Do you think the white wolf is an angel?" Grace looked at the magnificent creature lying in the snow, giving its warmth to a stranger, organizing its pack to save children it had no biological reason to care about. "I think your mom might have been right." The children began sharing stories about people they'd lost. Grandparents, parents, siblings, friends. The bus became a confessional in the darkness, a safe space where grief could be spoken aloud. Tommy talked about his mother, killed in a car accident. "Dad says she's watching over us from heaven. Maybe she sent the wolves." "Maybe she did," Grace agreed. 1 a.m. The storm had stopped completely. The sky cleared, revealing stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. The moon emerged, 3/4 full, bathing the world in silver light. Grace could finally see their surroundings. They were on a narrow mountain road with a steep drop on one side and cliffs on the other. The bus was completely buried in snow, except for the roof. The wolves' shelter had probably saved their lives, and surrounding the bus in a perfect circle were at least 20 wolves, maybe more. The entire pack had come, grey, black, brown, silver, and leading them all, the white wolf with blue eyes that reflected moonlight like mirrors. "Miss Grace, look!" Marcus pointed up the road. In the distance, barely visible, were lights, headlights, moving slowly down the mountain. "They're coming," Grace breathed. "Rescue is coming." She grabbed a road flare, stumbled to the bus door, and pushed it open. The cold hit her like a fist, but she didn't care. She struck the flare, and brilliant red light exploded into the night. The white wolf stood immediately, watching. Grace waved the flare over her head, creating an arc of light. The distant headlights paused, then began moving faster, heading directly toward them. "They see us!" Grace shouted. "Kids, they see us! We're saved!" The children erupted in cheers and tears and laughter. Grace lit a second flare, marking their position clearly. The headlights grew closer, and she could hear engines now, multiple vehicles. The white wolf walked to Grace and stopped directly in front of her. They stood facing each other, woman and wolf, separated by 3 feet and an impossible gulf of species. "Thank you," Grace said, her voice breaking. "I don't know what you are, or why you helped us, but thank you. You saved them. You saved all of us." The white wolf held her gaze for a long moment. Then it did something that Grace would never be able to explain rationally. It bowed its head, just slightly, in acknowledgement, in farewell. Then it turned and walked into the forest. The pack followed, melting into the shadows between the trees. Within seconds, they were gone, as if they had never been there at all. The rescue convoy arrived 5 minutes later. 3 snowmobiles, 2 pickup trucks with chains, and a sheriff's SUV. Sheriff Tom Patterson jumped out, followed by Dr. Sarah Kim from Cold Springs Medical Center. "Grace, thank God!" Patterson ran to her. "We've been searching for hours. The storm knocked out communications. We had no idea where you were until we saw your flare." "The children," Grace said through chattering teeth. "Check the children first." Dr. Kim and 2 EMTs rushed onto the bus. Grace heard their voices, calm and professional, assessing the 12 young lives that had been her responsibility. Within minutes, the verdict came. "They're hypothermic but stable. No critical cases. It's a miracle, Grace. In these temperatures, stranded this long, it's a genuine miracle they're all alive." Sheriff Patterson wrapped Grace in a thermal blanket and helped her to his SUV. "What happened? How did you keep them alive?" Grace looked toward the forest, where the wolves had disappeared. In the snow, she could see the paw prints, the evidence of the shelter they'd built, the proof that it had all been real. "We had help," she said simply. "Help? From who? There's nothing out here for miles." Grace smiled through her exhaustion. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." The children were loaded into vehicles, wrapped in blankets, given warm fluids. Parents arrived, summoned by radio, and there were tears and reunions and prayers of thanksgiving. Emma Chen's father grabbed Grace's hands. "You saved my daughters. How can I ever thank you?" "I didn't save them," Grace said honestly. "The wolves did." "Wolves?" "A pack of wolves surrounded the bus. They kept us warm. They built a shelter. There was a white one, leading them. It organized everything." Mr. Chen looked at her with concern. "Grace, you're hypothermic. You're not thinking clearly." "I know what I saw." Sheriff Patterson pulled Grace aside. "Grace, there are no reports of wolf packs in this area. And wolves don't help humans. They avoid us." "Look at the snow," Grace insisted. "You'll see the tracks. You'll see what they built." But when Patterson shone his flashlight around the bus, the snow was smooth and undisturbed. The shelter of branches and snow was gone. The paw prints were gone. There was no evidence that the wolves had ever been there. "Grace, you've been through a trauma. Sometimes the mind creates things to help us cope." Grace wanted to argue, but she was too tired. Let them think she was confused, delusional, suffering from hypothermia-induced hallucinations. She knew the truth. As they drove down the mountain toward town and warmth and safety, Grace looked back one last time. At the edge of the forest, barely visible in the moonlight, stood a white wolf with blue eyes. It watched until the convoy disappeared around a curve. Then it turned and vanished into the wild darkness from which it had come. Cold Springs Medical Center was a small facility, barely large enough to handle 12 hypothermic children and one stubborn bus driver all at once. Dr. Sarah Kim worked through the night, checking vitals, administering warm IV fluids, monitoring core temperatures as they slowly climbed back to normal ranges. Grace sat in examination room 3, wrapped in heated blankets, refusing treatment until she knew every child was stable. Her fingers and toes were white with frostbite. Her core temperature was dangerously low at 94 degrees, but she wouldn't lie down, wouldn't rest, wouldn't stop asking about the kids. "Grace Mitchell, if you don't let me treat you right now, I'm going to have Sheriff Patterson arrest you
For being a stubborn fool," Dr. Kim said, hands on hips. "The children first. All of them." "The children are fine, better than fine actually, it's remarkable. 8 hours in those conditions should have resulted in severe frostbite, possibly amputations, maybe worse. But except for mild hypothermia, they're all going to be completely okay. Now, will you please let me make sure you don't lose your toes?" Grace finally relented. She lay back on the examination table while Dr. Kim worked on her extremities, slowly rewarming the frozen tissue. The pain was excruciating as blood flow returned, but Grace barely noticed. She was thinking about blue eyes in the darkness, about the impossible organization of wild animals, about the shelter that had disappeared. "Sarah," Grace said quietly, "do you believe in things that can't be explained?" Dr. Kim looked up from bandaging Grace's feet. "I'm a doctor. I believe in science and evidence." "That's not what I asked." The doctor was quiet for a moment. "My grandmother was from Korea. She used to tell stories about spirit animals that protected children. Tigers, mostly, in her stories. Said they were the souls of warriors who died protecting their villages. I always thought they were just fairy tales. But I've seen things in medicine that science can't fully explain. Patients who should have died, but didn't. Recoveries that defied all logic. Sometimes I wonder if there are forces at work beyond what we can measure." Dr. Kim met Grace's eyes. "Why do you ask?" "The wolves were real, Sarah. I don't care what the sheriff says or what the evidence shows. They were real, and they saved us." "I believe you." "You do?" Dr. Kim nodded toward the window. Outside, in the parking lot, parents were reuniting with their children. Through the glass, Grace could see Marcus Webb talking animatedly to his father, gesturing wildly, clearly telling the story. She could see Emma and Sarah Chen wrapped in their father's arms. She could see Tommy and Mia Reeves with their dad, all 3 of them crying happy tears. 12 children survived 8 hours in -30-degree weather with no heat source and minimal supplies. That shouldn't be possible, Grace. By every medical calculation, at least some of them should have severe injuries or worse. But they're all fine. Every single one. Dr. Kim smiled. "So yes, I believe something extraordinary happened out there. And if you say it was wolves, then I believe you." Grace felt tears well up. "Thank you. Now get some rest. Doctor's orders." But rest wouldn't come easily. Grace was moved to a recovery room where she was supposed to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw the white wolf's blue gaze, felt the enormous responsibility of those 12 lives, relived the moment when Sarah had nearly died in her arms. Around 4 a.m., there was a soft knock on her door. Marcus Webb poked his head in. "Miss Grace? You awake? Come in, honey." Marcus entered, followed by his father, a tall man with weathered skin and kind eyes. "My son insisted on seeing you before we left." "How are you feeling, Marcus?" "I'm okay.
They say I can go home. Marcus held something in his hands, a piece of paper folded carefully. I drew something. While we were waiting. I wanted you to have it. He handed her the paper. Grace unfolded it and caught her breath. It was a pencil drawing, remarkably detailed for a 12-year-old. It showed the school bus surrounded by wolves, and in front, larger than all the others, was the white wolf. Marcus had captured those blue eyes perfectly, had somehow conveyed the intelligence and purpose in the animal's gaze. Marcus, this is beautiful. I wanted proof, before I forgot what it looked like, before people said we imagined it. Marcus looked at his father, then back at Grace. We didn't imagine it, right? The wolves were real? They were real, Grace said firmly. Don't let anyone tell you different. Marcus's father spoke up. My grandfather's story about the white wolf. I always thought it was dementia, old age confusion. But Marcus told me what happened tonight, and the details matched too closely. The blue eyes, the way it organized the other wolves, the way it seemed to understand what you needed. You believe us? Mr. Webb nodded slowly. My father said that white wolves appear once in a generation, always in winter, always to protect children. Said it's been happening in these mountains for over 100 years. Different wolves, maybe, but the same purpose, same blue eyes. He paused. I think tonight, you met something that's been watching over families in Glacier County for a very long time. After they left, Grace stared at Marcus's drawing for a long time. Then she carefully folded it and tucked it into her jacket pocket. Evidence. Proof. Something tangible to hold on to when doubt crept in. The night gave way to grey dawn. Grace finally dozed off around 5 a.m., only to be awakened at 7 by voices outside her room. She recognized Sheriff Patterson's voice and another man's, unfamiliar and official sounding. I'm telling you, Tom, the evidence doesn't support her story. We found the bus. We documented everything. There were no wolf tracks, no shelter made of branches, nothing to indicate animals were anywhere near that vehicle. So what are you saying, Dave? That she made it up? I'm saying she experienced a traumatic event in extreme conditions. Hypothermia causes hallucinations, confusion, false memories. It's a medical fact. Grace pushed herself out of bed, ignoring the pain in her frostbitten extremities, and yanked open the door. I know what I saw. The unfamiliar man turned. He was about 50, wearing a jacket that identified him as Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks. Ms. Mitchell, I'm David Reeves, Regional Wildlife Supervisor. I understand you've been through a terrible ordeal. Don't patronize me. I'm not confused, and I didn't hallucinate. There were wolves, at least 20 of them, led by a white wolf with blue eyes. Ms. Mitchell, there are no documented white wolves in Montana. The closest you might find is an Arctic wolf, but they don't range this far south. And wolves don't help humans. They avoid us. The behavior you're describing simply doesn't happen. Then explain how 12 children survived 8 hours in those conditions. Body heat, the bus's residual insulation, the emergency supplies you had. You did everything right, Ms. Mitchell. You saved those children with your training and quick thinking. You should be proud. It wasn't me. It was the wolves. Reeves exchanged a glance with Sheriff Patterson. Ms. Mitchell, I think you should rest. You've been through significant trauma. Grace wanted to scream, to shake them, to make them understand. But she saw the pity in their eyes, the certainty that she was suffering from cold-induced delusion. No amount of argument would change their minds. Fine, she said quietly. Believe what you want. She closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed, feeling utterly alone. Everyone thought she was crazy. The physical evidence had disappeared. Even if the children backed up her story, adults would dismiss it as mass hysteria, as kids feeding off each other's imagination. There was another knock, softer this time. Miss Grace? It's Emma. Grace opened the door to find Emma and Sarah Chen standing with their father. Both girls rushed forward and hugged her. "Daddy doesn't believe us about the wolves," Emma said, her voice indignant. "He says we imagined them." "We didn't imagine them," Sarah insisted. "The white one kept me warm when I was dying. I felt it." Mr. Chen looked embarrassed. "Girls, I'm not saying you're lying. I'm saying that sometimes when we're scared and cold, our minds can play tricks." It wasn't a trick. Emma pulled out her own drawing, similar to
Marcus's, but with more colors, showing the wolves surrounding the bus. "I drew it exactly how I remember." Sarah nodded vigorously. "The white wolf had blue eyes, like the sky, like ice. I'll never forget." Grace knelt down to their level, ignoring the protest from her bandaged feet. "Listen to me, both of you. Don't ever let anyone convince you that what you saw wasn't real. The wolves were there. They saved us. And someday, people will believe. But until then, you hold on to what you know is true, okay?" Both girls nodded seriously, then hugged her again before their father led them away. Over the next few hours, more children came to visit. Tommy and Mia Reeves brought her a card they'd made with drawings of wolves. The Morrison twins brought flowers from their mother's garden, half frozen but beautiful. Lily Patterson brought a book about wolves. Joseph Little Bear brought something else. "My grandfather wants to meet you," Joseph said quietly. "He heard about what happened. He says he needs to talk to you about the white wolf." "Your grandfather from the Blackfeet Reservation?" Joseph nodded. "He's waiting outside. The hospital wouldn't let him in because visiting hours haven't started yet, but he drove 4 hours through the snow to get here. Says it's important." Grace pulled on her jacket and shoes, wincing at the pain, and followed Joseph outside. In the parking lot, leaning against an old pickup truck, stood an elderly Native American man. He had to be at least 80, with long white hair pulled back in a braid and a face that looked like weathered leather. But his eyes were sharp and clear. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, his voice surprisingly strong. "I'm Henry Little Bear, Joseph's grandfather." "Mr. Little Bear, Joseph said you wanted to speak with me." "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. Henry led her to a bench overlooking the mountains, the same peaks where the bus had been stranded. He sat down slowly, and Grace joined him. "My grandson told me about the white wolf. Blue eyes, yes?" "Yes. And it organized the others, gave orders, built a shelter." "Yes." Henry nodded as if this confirmed something. "That wolf has been in these mountains for a very long time. My grandfather saw it when he was a boy in 1891. My father saw it in 1934. I saw it in 1967, when I was 17 years old." Grace felt chills that had nothing to do with the cold. "That's impossible. Wolves don't live that long." "This one does. Or maybe it's not the same wolf. Maybe it's a bloodline, like you said to young Marcus. Or maybe—" Henry paused, choosing his words carefully. "Maybe it's something that takes the shape of a wolf because that's a form we can understand and accept." "You're saying it's a spirit?" "I'm saying there are things in these mountains older than white settlements, older than my people's oldest stories. Things that protect, that watch over, that intervene when the innocent are in danger." Henry looked at her directly. "The white wolf appears Once in a generation, always in winter, always when children are dying from cold, and always it saves them. Why doesn't it appear more often? There must be other emergencies, other children in danger." "I don't know. Maybe it can only manifest under certain conditions. Maybe the danger has to be great enough, the need desperate enough. Maybe there are rules even spirits must follow." Henry reached into his jacket and pulled out an old photograph, faded and creased. "This was taken in 1967, after the wolf saved me and 2 friends." Grace took the photo. It showed 3 teenage boys standing in front of a cabin, wrapped in blankets, clearly having survived something terrible. And in the background, barely visible at the tree line, was a white shape. A wolf. Even in the grainy old photograph, she could see the blue eyes. "I kept this for 58 years. People said I was crazy, said there was no wolf, said the photo showed nothing but a shadow.
But I knew. And now you know too. What am I supposed to do with this knowledge? Tell the truth. Document what happened. Make sure the story doesn't die. Because someday, maybe in another 20 or 30 years, that wolf will appear again. And whoever it saves will need to know they're not crazy. That others have seen it too. That it's real. Henry stood slowly. The wolf chose to reveal itself to you and those children for a reason. Honor that choice. He handed her the photograph. Keep it. Add it to your evidence. Marcus has his drawing, Emma has hers, and now you have this. 3 generations of proof. After Henry left, Grace sat alone on the bench, holding the photograph, staring at the barely visible white shape with blue eyes. 3 generations, 1891, 1934, 1967, and now 2024. The pattern was clear. Roughly every 30 years, the white wolf appeared to save children from freezing to death in the Montana winter. The question was why? Grace was released from the hospital that afternoon with strict instructions to rest, to keep her frostbitten extremities elevated, to return immediately if she showed any signs of infection. She ignored most of it. Instead, she drove to the Cold Springs Public Library. The librarian, Mrs. Henderson, looked surprised to see her. "Grace, shouldn't you be resting?"
I need to research something. Local history, particularly winter rescues involving children. Mrs. Henderson led her to the historical archives section. What are you looking for specifically? Stories about wolves, white wolves, particularly from 1891, 1934, and 1967. The librarian's expression changed. "You're not the first person to ask about this." "I'm not?" Mrs. Henderson pulled out a file box marked Unexplained Events, Local History. Every few decades, someone comes in asking about the white wolf. Usually it's someone who claims to have seen it. The last person was Henry Littlebear back in 1967. Before that, it was a man named Robert Morrison in 1934. Grace opened the box with trembling hands. Inside were newspaper clippings, handwritten accounts, photographs. She spread them across the table and began to read. The first account was from 1891, written in elegant script in a journal that belonged to a woman named Catherine Walsh. It described how her 3 children had been caught in a blizzard while traveling from their homestead to town. The wagon had overturned, the horses had run off, and the children were stranded. A white wolf had appeared, along with its pack, and kept the children warm until rescue arrived. The next account was from 1934, a newspaper article with the headline, "Miracle in Mountains, Children Survive 3 Days in Blizzard." It told the story of 5 children whose school had burned down during a storm, trapping them outside in the cold. A pack of wolves, led by a white one with eyes like blue ice, had sheltered them until help came. Then came Henry Littlebear's account from 1967, handwritten and detailed. He and 2 friends had been ice fishing when the ice broke. They'd made it to shore, but were soaking wet in -20-degree weather with no way to start a fire. The white wolf and its pack had surrounded them, shared body heat, kept them alive for 6 hours until a search party found them. Every 30 years, like clockwork, the pattern was undeniable. Grace found more. A mention in a journal from 1858 about a ghost wolf that saved 2 Blackfeet children lost in a snowstorm. A story from 1922 about a white wolf helping a family stranded in the mountains. Not all were exactly 30 years apart, but they clustered around that time frame. Most significantly, every account mentioned blue eyes. Every single one. "This is impossible," Grace whispered. "Is it?" Mrs. Henderson had been reading over her shoulder. "Or is it just something we don't understand yet? Montana has a lot of history that doesn't fit in neat boxes." Grace gathered copies of everything she could find. She now had testimony from multiple generations, photographs, newspaper articles, and her own experience. It still wouldn't be enough to convince skeptics, but it was something. That evening,
Grace received an unexpected visitor at her small house on the edge of town. Sheriff Patterson stood on her doorstep, looking uncomfortable.
"Grace, can I come in?" She led him to her living room, where she had spread out all her evidence on the coffee table. Marcus's drawing, Henry's photograph, the historical documents, her own notes from the experience. Patterson saw it all and sighed. "You're not going to let this go, are you? Would you if you were me?" "Honestly, I don't know." He sat down heavily. "I came to tell you that I spoke with all 12 children separately, not together, where they could influence each other's stories, separately. And every single one of them described the same thing. A white wolf with blue eyes leading a pack. The wolves building a shelter around the bus. The white wolf understanding when you needed privacy for the bathroom break. The wolves bringing more pack members when the cold got worse." Patterson ran his hand through his hair. 12 kids, Grace. 12 separate testimonies with consistent details. "So you believe me now?" "I believe something happened out there that I can't explain. Whether it was wolves or something else, I don't know. But I've been a cop for 25 years, and I know when people are telling the truth. Those kids aren't lying. You're not lying. You all saw something." Grace felt validation wash over her. "Thank you, Tom." "Don't thank me yet. I can't put any of this in an official report. My superiors would think I'd lost my mind. The insurance company wants a straightforward account of a bus breakdown and hypothermia, not stories about supernatural wolves. As far as the official record goes, you saved those kids through good training and smart decisions." "But unofficially?" Patterson looked at the evidence spread across her table. "Unofficially, I think you and those children encountered something that's been protecting people in these mountains for a very long time. And I think you should document everything, just like you're doing. Because someday, someone else is going to need to know they're not crazy." After Patterson left, Grace sat alone with her evidence and her memories. She thought about the white wolf's blue eyes, about the impossible intelligence in that gaze, about the way it had bowed to her before disappearing into the forest. She opened her laptop and began to write. She documented everything, the exact time of the breakdown, the temperature readings, every detail of the wolves' behavior, every word spoken, every moment of the 8-hour ordeal. She scanned Marcus's drawing, Henry's photograph, the historical documents. She created a comprehensive file that told the complete story. Then she saved it with a title, The White Wolf of Glacier County, a chronicle spanning generations. She sent copies to Mrs. Henderson at the library, to Henry Little Bear, to Sheriff Patterson, and to each of the 12 children's families with a note. "This is the truth of what happened. Keep it safe. Someday, it may matter." 3 days later, Grace returned to work. The school district had wanted her to take more time off, but she refused. She needed normalcy, needed to get back in the driver's seat, needed to prove to herself that she wasn't broken by the experience. The first day back, all 12 children were waiting at the bus stop when she arrived. They'd coordinated somehow, all of them boarding at the first stop, instead of their usual locations. "We wanted to ride together," Marcus explained. "All of us. On your first day back." Grace felt tears prick her eyes. "Well, climb aboard then." They took their usual seats, and Grace started the engine. As she pulled away from the stop, Tommy called out from the back, "Miss Grace, we made something for you. All of us together." He brought forward a large poster board. On it, all 12 children had contributed drawings, writings, and handprints. In the center was a beautifully rendered picture of the white wolf, clearly drawn by someone with more skill than the children possessed. Grace recognized Emma Chen's father's artistic style. Around the central image, each child had written their account of what happened. Short sentences, simple words, but powerful testimony. "The white wolf saved us," Marcus Webb. "It had blue eyes like ice," Sarah Chen. "It wasn't scary, it was protecting us," Tommy Reeves. "The wolves made a house around the bus," Jake Morrison.
Miss Grace was brave, but the wolves were braver. Lily Patterson. My grandfather says white wolves are spirits. I believe him. Joseph Littlebear. And in Emma Chen's careful handwriting, some angels have fur instead of wings. Grace had to pull over because she was crying too hard to see the road. The children climbed out of their seats and surrounded her, 12 small bodies offering comfort and solidarity. We won't forget, Marcus said firmly. None of us will. And when people say we made it up, we'll tell them they're wrong. We were there. We know what's true. Grace hugged them all, these 12 brave souls who had faced death with her and survived. They had been bonded by cold and fear and salvation, and that bond would last their entire lives. As Grace continued the route that day, stopping at each child's home to drop them off safely, she noticed something. At the tree line of every property, just visible in the shadows, were shapes. Wolves. Grey ones mostly, watching silently as each child returned home safely. And at the last stop, when Emma and Sarah Chen climbed off the bus and ran to their father, Grace saw it. Standing at the edge of the forest, magnificent and impossible, was the white wolf. It stood in the snow, blue eyes reflecting the afternoon sun, watching to make sure its charges reached safety.
Grace raised her hand in acknowledgement, in farewell, in gratitude. The white wolf held her gaze for a heartbeat, then turned and walked into the forest, its white coat blending with the snow until it was impossible to tell where wolf ended and winter began. Grace drove home in the gathering dusk, her heart full. She had seen something miraculous. She had been part of something that couldn't be explained, but was undeniably real. And she had proof, testimony, evidence that future generations would need when the white wolf appeared again. Because it would appear again, in another 20 or 30 years, when children were dying from cold, when hope seemed lost, when the winter was at its cruelest, the white wolf would come. It always had. It always would. That was its purpose, its calling, its eternal mission, to protect the innocent, to save the helpless, to prove that even in the darkest, coldest moments, there was something watching over those who needed protection most. Grace went to sleep that night with Marcus's drawing on her nightstand, with Henry's photograph in a frame on her dresser, with her detailed chronicle saved in multiple locations. And outside her window, in the forest that bordered her property, blue eyes watched from the shadows, keeping vigil, keeping faith, keeping the promise that the white wolf had made generations ago when it first appeared in these mountains with a purpose that transcended death and time and the boundaries between what was wild and what was divine. The guardian of Glacier County's children, the wolf that defied explanation, the spirit or animal or something in between that appeared when it was needed most. The white wolf with eyes like winter sky, watching over the innocent in the eternal cold. 3 weeks passed before the media storm hit. It started small, a local newspaper article titled, "Bus Driver and Student Survive Blizzard Ordeal." The story focused on Grace's quick thinking, the emergency supplies, the lucky timing of rescue. No mention of wolves. The school district preferred it that way, clean and simple, a story of human resilience without complications. But then Tommy Reeves told his story at Show and Tell. His teacher, Mrs. Bradford, called it creative fiction and gave him an A for imagination. Tommy went home crying, insisting it was real. His father, John Reeves, a veteran reporter for the Montana Tribune, decided to investigate. John interviewed all 12 children separately. He spoke with Grace, with Henry Littlebear, with Mrs. Henderson at the library. He reviewed the historical documents, studied the photographs, examined Marcus's drawings. And then he wrote an article that changed everything. The White Wolf of Glacier County, Miracle, Mystery, or Montana Legend come to life. The article went viral. Within 48 hours, it had been picked up by regional news, then national outlets. CNN sent a crew. Fox News ran a segment. The Discovery Channel called wanting to do a documentary. Grace's quiet life exploded into chaos. News vans parked outside her house. Reporters ambushed her at the grocery store, at the gas station, on her bus route. They wanted interviews, wanted her to retell the story, wanted her to speculate about what the wolf really was. The school district was furious. Superintendent Morris called Grace into his office, his face red with anger. "Do you have any idea what you've done? We have reporters harassing our students, camping outside the school. Parents are complaining. The board is talking about liability issues, about whether you're mentally fit to drive." "I told the truth," Grace said calmly. "The truth? Grace, you're claiming that magical wolves saved you. Do you understand how that sounds?" "I never said magical. I said wolves. A pack of wolves, led by a white one. That's what happened." "There's no evidence. Fish and wildlife found nothing. No tracks, no shelter, nothing to support your story. Except 12 children who all saw the same thing." Morris leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "The board is considering suspension pending a psychological evaluation." "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that you experience severe hypothermia and may be suffering from lasting effects. On the grounds that you're spreading stories that could be harmful to the district's reputation." Grace stood. "Then I quit." Morris looked shocked. "What?" "I quit. Effective immediately. I won't work for people who call me a liar and demand I deny what saved those children's lives." Grace pulled off her bus driver badge and set it on the desk. "Those kids know the truth. I know the truth. And I'm not going to tell them their experience didn't matter just because it makes adults uncomfortable." She walked out of the office with her head high, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. The children's parents had mixed reactions to the media attention. Some embraced it, proud that their kids had survived something remarkable. Others were protective, angry that their children were being questioned and scrutinized. But the children themselves were united. They stood by their story with a solidarity that impressed even the most skeptical journalists. When a CNN reporter tried to suggest they'd imagined the wolves due to hypothermia, 12-year-old Marcus Webb looked her dead in the eye and said, "Lady, I know the difference between real and pretend. The wolves were real. End of story." The clip went viral, spawning memes and internet debates. #WhiteWolfOfMontana trended on Twitter. Reddit threads dissected every detail. Believers and skeptics argued endlessly online. Wildlife experts weighed in. Dr. Janet Morrison from the University of Montana explained that while wolf packs did exhibit complex social behavior, the level of organization described was highly unusual but not technically impossible. Other experts were less generous, calling the entire account mass hysteria or a shared delusion brought on by trauma. But then something unexpected happened. Other people started coming forward. An elderly woman in Kalispell called the Tribune, claiming she'd seen a white wolf in 1952 when she was 8 years old, lost in a snowstorm. A man from Whitefish shared his grandfather's journal from 1898, describing a white wolf that saved his family during a blizzard. A Blackfeet tribal elder provided oral histories passed down through generations, all mentioning a spirit wolf that protected children in winter. The stories kept coming, dozens of them, spanning over a century, all describing the same thing, a white wolf with blue eyes that appeared in winter storms to save the innocent. Dr. Rebecca Chen, a folklorist from Seattle, drove to Montana to study the phenomenon. She interviewed Grace, the children, Henry Little Bear, and as many historical witnesses as she could find. Her conclusion, published in the Journal of American Folklore, was cautious but intriguing. While we cannot verify the existence of an individual wolf living for over a century, the consistency of these accounts across generations suggests either a remarkable cultural legend with staying power or a genuine phenomenon that defies conventional zoological explanation. The blue eyes are particularly significant, as this is not a common trait in grey wolves, and would likely be remembered and transmitted accurately through oral tradition. I propose that Glacier County may be home to a rare bloodline of leucistic wolves with genetic blue eyes, and that this bloodline has exhibited unusually altruistic behavior toward humans in crisis situations. Whether this is learned behavior, passed down through wolf generations, or something more extraordinary, remains to be determined. The article gave the story academic legitimacy. Universities started expressing interest. National Geographic sent photographers to Montana, hoping to document the wolves. But the white wolf did not appear for cameras. It had done what it came to do. The children were safe. Winter was ending. There was no need to reveal itself further. Grace settled into her new life without the school district. She'd saved enough money to live simply, and she didn't need much. What she did need was purpose, and she found it in an unexpected way. Henry Little Bear approached her with a proposal. We should create a record, a proper archive of every white wolf sighting, every piece of evidence, every testimony, so the next person who sees it won't feel alone. Together, they established the Glacier County White Wolf Archive, housed in a small room at the public library. Mrs. Henderson donated the space and helped organize the collection. They gathered everything: historical documents, photographs, drawings, written testimonies, newspaper articles, academic papers. Grace contributed her detailed chronicle. Marcus donated his drawings. Henry provided his photograph and his grandfather's journal. Emma Chen's father painted a large portrait
Of the white wolf, based on the children's descriptions, which became the archive's centerpiece. The archive became something more than just a collection of documents. It became a pilgrimage site. People who had experienced unexplained rescues, who had seen things they couldn't explain, who had stories that no one believed, they came to the archive. They added their testimonies. They found community with others who understood. Grace became the archive's unofficial curator. She spent her days organizing documents, interviewing witnesses, corresponding with researchers. She gave tours to school groups, telling the story without embellishment, presenting the evidence and letting people draw their own conclusions. The 12 children visited often. Even as winter turned to spring and spring to summer, they came back to the archive. They brought friends, showed them the evidence, shared their experience with pride instead of shame. "This is important," Lily Patterson told Grace one afternoon. "What happened to us? It matters, not just for us, but for whoever sees the white wolf next." Grace agreed. The archive wasn't about proving skeptics wrong. It was about preserving truth for those who would need it in the future. Summer passed. The media attention faded as new stories captured public interest. Life in Cold Springs returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after such extraordinary events. Grace noticed that the children had changed. Marcus was more confident, more willing to speak up in class. Sarah was less fearful, having faced death and survived. Tommy got into fewer fights, channeling his energy into drawing wolves obsessively. Emma talked about becoming a veterinarian, specializing in wildlife. Joseph Little Bear started learning the old stories from his grandfather, determined to preserve the oral traditions. They had been marked by the experience, shaped by it, made stronger by it. In October, Grace received a letter from the National Park Service. They wanted to hire her as a seasonal ranger and wildlife educator at Glacier National Park. The job would involve teaching visitors about local wildlife, including wolves. The letter specifically mentioned her unique expertise and perspective on wolf behavior. Grace accepted. It felt right, staying close to the mountains where the white wolf roamed, sharing knowledge with those who came to experience the wilderness. On her first day at the park, a tourist asked if she'd ever seen a white wolf. Grace smiled and told the truth. "Yes, once, and it saved my life and the lives of 12 children. Do you think you'll see it again?" Grace looked toward the mountains, snow already capping the highest peaks as November approached. "Not this winter. It only comes when it's needed, when children are dying and there's no other hope. But someday, maybe in 20 or 30 years, it will appear again. And when it does, someone will remember the stories. They'll know they're not alone." The first snow fell in mid-November. Grace stood at her window watching the flakes drift down, remembering. Another snowfall.
Another night when the world turned white and deadly. Her phone rang. It was Marcus. "Miss Grace, have you seen the news? There's a school bus missing near Yellowstone, broke down in a storm. 15 kids on board." Grace's heart clenched. "When?" "About 3 hours ago. They lost radio contact, temperatures dropping fast." Grace grabbed her coat. "I'm going to the command center." She drove to the emergency response headquarters, where Sheriff Patterson was coordinating search efforts with park rangers and search and rescue teams. "Grace," Patterson greeted her grimly. "Weather's too bad for helicopters. We've got ground teams searching, but in this storm..." "Have they checked for wolf activity in the area?" Patterson looked at her strangely. "Wolf activity? Why would that matter?" "Because if the white wolf is going to appear, it would be now. In a storm like this with children in danger, tell your teams to look for wolf tracks, for signs of pack activity around the bus." "Grace, I can't tell professional search teams to look for mythical wolves." "Then I'll go myself." "Absolutely not. You're not trained for search and rescue, and the conditions are..." "I know exactly what the conditions are. I lived through them, and I know that if that bus is surrounded by wolves, your teams might be too afraid to approach. They need to know the wolves are helping, not threatening." Patterson stared at her for a long moment, then made a decision. "Okay, you can ride along with Team 3, but you follow orders, stay safe, and if I tell you to leave, you leave. Clear?" "Clear." Grace suited up in borrowed gear and joined Team 3, led by a seasoned ranger named Mike Torres. They headed into the storm on snowmobiles, following coordinates to where the bus had last been tracked. The conditions were brutal, wind howling, snow falling so thick that visibility was near zero. Grace remembered this feeling, this sense of the world disappearing into white nothingness. They found the bus 2 hours later, nearly buried in snow on a mountain road. Torres approached carefully, flashlight cutting through the darkness. Then he stopped dead. "Grace, you need to see this." Grace climbed off her snowmobile and moved forward. There, in the snow around the bus, were tracks. Large, distinctive paw prints, dozens of them. And surrounding the bus, lying in the snow just like they had 3 weeks ago, were wolves. 10 of them, maybe more. Grey bodies barely visible in the storm. And sitting directly in front of the bus, facing Torres and his team with calm blue eyes, was the white wolf. Torres's hand moved to his radio. "Command, this is Team 3. We've found the bus, and you're not going to believe this. It's surrounded by wolves. Repeat, surrounded by wolves. They appear to be protecting it." Team 3, confirm. "Did you say protecting?" "Affirmative. The wolves are positioned around the bus in a defensive formation. There's a white one in front. Large animal, possibly alpha. It's not showing aggression, but it's clearly guarding the vehicle." Grace moved forward slowly. "Let me talk to them." "Talk to them? Grace, they're wild animals." "Trust me." Grace approached the white wolf carefully, hands visible, posture non-threatening. The animal watched her with those impossible blue eyes, recognition flickering in their depths. "You remember me," Grace said softly. "We met 3 weeks ago on Route 89. You saved my children." The white wolf tilted its head slightly, acknowledging. "Are there children in there? Are they alive?" The wolf stood and walked to the bus door, pressing its nose against the metal. Then it looked back at Grace and nodded, a deliberate motion that made Torres gasp behind her. "They're alive!" Grace called to Torres. "The wolves are keeping them warm. We need to get the door open, but we need to do it carefully. The wolves aren't the danger, the cold is." It took 30 minutes to safely extract all 15 children from the bus. The wolves watched, but didn't interfere. They maintained their positions, creating a windbreak while the rescue team worked. Every child was hypothermic, but alive. Scared, but unharmed. And every single one of them told the same story. The white wolf had appeared when they were freezing, had brought its pack, had kept them warm. As the last child was loaded onto a rescue sled,
Grace turned to thank the white wolf. But it was already gone. The entire pack had melted into the storm, disappearing as silently as they had arrived. All that remained were the tracks in the snow, already being filled by fresh powder. Torres stood beside Grace, staring at the vanishing paw prints. "I saw it. We all saw it. That wolf understood you. It responded to your questions. It coordinated its pack to save those kids." "I know. This is going to sound crazy, but I've been a ranger for 20 years. I've seen a lot of wolves. That wasn't normal wolf behavior. That wasn't even exceptional wolf behavior. That was something else entirely."
Yes, Grace agreed. It was. The rescue was successful. All 15 children survived with no permanent injuries. The media descended again, and the story of the white wolf exploded back into national consciousness. But this time, there were witnesses beyond just the victims. Torres and his entire team had seen the wolves. They had documented the tracks, the positions, the organized behavior. They had watched the white wolf respond to Grace's words. The evidence was undeniable. Dr. Morrison from the University of Montana returned to study the new incident. She interviewed everyone involved, analyzed the tracks, reviewed Torres's field reports. Her conclusion was more definitive this time. "While I cannot explain how or why, the evidence suggests that a specific wolf or wolf lineage in Glacier County exhibits behaviors that go beyond normal canine intelligence. The white wolf appears to respond to human crisis situations involving children, mobilizing its pack to provide assistance. Whether this is learned behavior, genetic predisposition, or something we don't yet have the framework to understand, I cannot say. But it is real. The evidence is overwhelming." The Glacier County White Wolf Archive expanded rapidly after the second rescue. Grace worked full-time documenting both incidents, creating educational materials, giving presentations. The archive became an official part of the Montana Historical Society. Universities sent researchers, wildlife organizations sent observers. Everyone wanted to understand the white wolf. But the wolf didn't appear for study, it appeared for salvation. That was its purpose, its calling, and it would not be exploited or exhibited. Winter ended, spring came. The children from both bus incidents stayed in touch with each other, forming a bond that transcended age and background. They called themselves the Wolf Pack and met monthly at the archive, sharing their experiences, supporting each other. Grace watched them grow and heal and thrive. She saw how the experience had changed them, had given them strength and purpose, and a story they would carry forever. On the anniversary of the first rescue, all 12 original children and their families gathered at the archive for a private ceremony. They unveiled a plaque that read, "In memory of the White Wolf of Glacier County, guardian of the innocent, protector of the lost proof that miracles still exist in the wild places, January 15th, 2024. Below the words, Emma Chen's father had painted the white wolf, blue eyes gleaming, surrounded by snow and stars. Grace stood before the plaque with the children clustered around her, and she felt complete. The story had been told. The evidence had been preserved. The next generation would know the truth. "Thank you," she whispered, speaking to the wolf she knew was out there somewhere in the mountains. "Thank you for saving them. Thank you for showing me that there's still magic in this world." That night, Grace had a dream. She was back on the bus, back in the storm, back in that moment of terror when she thought they were all going to die. But this time, when the white wolf appeared, it spoke. Not in words, but in understanding that flowed directly into her mind. "I was a father once. I had pups. I failed to protect them from the cold. They died while I hunted, froze while I was away. I died searching for them in the snow, died calling their names, died with my failure. But death was not the end. I was given a choice. Move on to whatever comes next, or stay. Stay and protect other fathers' children. Stay and make sure no child dies from cold when I could prevent it. Stay and turn my failure
into purpose. I stayed. I will always stay. As long as children face the winter alone, I will come. As long as there is need, I will answer. This is my redemption. This is my peace. Tell them. Tell the ones I save. Tell them they are not forgotten. Tell them someone watches. Tell them love doesn't end, it just changes form. Tell them. Grace woke with tears on her face and absolute certainty in her heart. She wrote down every word of the dream, added it to the archive, and titled it The White Wolf's Purpose. She didn't know if it was truly the wolf's voice she'd heard, or her own mind making sense of the impossible. It didn't matter. The message was what mattered. Love doesn't end, it just changes form. Years would pass. Grace would grow older. The children would become adults, have children of their own, tell the story to new generations. The archive would expand and be moved to a larger facility. Researchers would continue studying the phenomenon. Skeptics would continue doubting. And every 20 or 30 years, like clockwork, the white wolf would appear. In storms, in darkness, in moments of desperate need. It would come, it would save, it would vanish. But it would never be forgotten. Because Grace and 12 children had seen it, had been saved by it, had documented it, had created a record that would outlive them all. The White Wolf of Glacier County. Guardian, protector, miracle, real. Grace Mitchell drove her routes through the park, taught visitors about wolves, curated the archive, and lived a life filled with purpose. She never saw the white wolf again after that second rescue. She didn't need to. She knew it was out there, watching, waiting, ready. On cold winter nights, when the wind howled and the snow fell thick, Grace would stand at her window and look toward the mountains. Sometimes, just sometimes, she would see a flash of white moving through the trees, blue eyes gleaming in the darkness. And she would smile and whisper, "Thank you." And somewhere in the vast wilderness of Montana, in the eternal winter of the high peaks, the white wolf would hear and remember and continue its endless vigil, protecting the innocent, saving the lost, proving that even in the darkest cold, there is light, there is hope, there is love that transcends death and time and the boundary between what is wild and what is divine. The white wolf lives. The children are safe. The story continues. And that is all that matters.